Good morning and welcome. Buenos días y bienvenidos a nuestro evento del día de hoy, Alimentando al Mundo, una conversación con los ministros de Agricultura de América Latina. Soy Benjamin Guedán, director interino del programa latinoamericano del Wilson Center en Washington, D.C. Antes de iniciar, quisiera darle un especial agradecimiento a nuestro copatrocinador del evento del día de hoy, el Instituto Interamericano de Cooperación para la Agricultura, ICA, por su invaluable apoyo en la organización de nuestro evento. También agradecemos a CIPEC por su colaboración en la moderación de este importantísimo diálogo. La conversación de esta mañana busca centrarse en el rol de la agricultura de las Américas en la recuperación económica regional y en la seguridad alimentaria mundial, el impacto ambiental del sector y cómo la tecnología puede contribuir a superar los desafíos actuales, entre ellos la escasez de fertilizantes. La pandemia del COVID-19 y la guerra en Ucrania han alterado los patrones globales de comercio, producción y consumo de alimentos, aumentando los precios de productos alimenticios y disminuyendo el suministro de fertilizantes. Por su parte, la inseguridad alimentaria ha aumentado en todos los rincones del mundo y de forma contundente en América Latina y el Caribe. En 2020, 4 de cada 10 personas en la región sufrían los efectos de la inseguridad alimentaria, lo cual significa 60 millones de personas más que el año anterior, el punto más alto desde el año 2000. A pesar del difícil escenario, los países agrícolas, muchos de ellos en nuestro hemisferio, tienen la oportunidad de aprovechar de los altos precios mundiales para apoyar el desarrollo económico de sus países, mientras que hacen frente a la inseguridad alimentaria en el mundo. A su vez, el cambio climático juega un rol fundamental en cómo los países de la región enfrentan este reto. El impacto ambiental del sector agrícola que aportan a las emisiones de carbono y metano y la deforestación significa un reto en las agendas de desarrollo nacionales. América Latina y el Caribe ya sienten los efectos que ha generado el cambio climático, tales como sequías, inundaciones y huracanes, impactando directamente a los agricultores. Considerando lo anterior, existen esfuerzos para desarrollar nuevas innovaciones, tecnologías y técnicas alternativas que ayuden a disminuir el impacto ambiental que se tiene en el sector agrícola y, a su vez, hacer frente a las necesidades globales para proveer alimentos a escala mundial. En la conversación del día de hoy, hablaremos sobre el rol del sector agrícola de nuestra región en la recuperación económica, tomando en cuenta la guerra en Ucrania, cómo los gobiernos latinoamericanos y caribeños están enfrentando el impacto ambiental del sector, cuáles son las oportunidades para colaborar con Estados Unidos y, últimamente, cuáles son los obstáculos al desarrollo de estos sectores tan claves para el desarrollo económico de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Me da mucho gusto en presentar a varios de los ministros de Agricultura de la región que van a estar participando en este diálogo. El moderador va a dar más información sobre sus experiencias y el conocimiento que llevan a esta conversación. El que va a moderar este importante diálogo es Diego Moreno, investigador senior de Ciudades y Desarrollo Económico del Centro de Implementación de Políticas Públicas para la Equidad y el Crecimiento, CIPEC. Diego, gracias por tu participación. Te dejo la palabra.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Benjamín. Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Un gusto acompañar al Wilson Center, al ICA y a CIPEC en este importante evento. Como decía Benjamín, hoy tenemos 4 destacados funcionarios del sector agroindustrial, digamos, en nuestra región. Juan José Bahilo, que es secretario de Agricultura, Ganadería y Pesca de la República Argentina. Cecilia López Montaño, ministra de Agricultura y Desarrollo Rural de Colombia. Bienvenida, Cecilia. Laura Suazo, secretaria de Agricultura y Ganadería de Honduras. Y Avinash Singh, ministro de Trinidad y Tobago. Así que, bueno, bienvenidos a todos. Muchas gracias por su tiempo valioso. Y bueno, como comentaba recién Benjamín, la idea de este intercambio de ideas era tratar de, en este contexto que describió muy bien, complejo a nivel internacional, la región de América Latina y el Caribe enfrenta una cantidad de desafíos, pero también, creo yo, una serie de oportunidades que, en función de cómo nos vayamos preparando y cómo abordemos justamente esta agenda nueva global, podemos, digamos, lograr mejorar tanto la seguridad alimentaria como también, digamos, el desarrollo de un sector clave, digamos, para nuestra región y para el mundo también, ¿no? En particular, bueno, veíamos el tema del cambio climático que mencionaba Benjamín, no solo, digamos, desde el punto de vista de los impactos, sino también un desafío nuevo que está apareciendo que tiene que ver con los mercados globales y las mayores restricciones en función de las emisiones de metano y también de los temas vinculados a deforestación, y que, bueno, en un mundo además donde estamos llegando ya a los 8.000 millones de habitantes, bueno, nos ponen, digamos, en una situación muy relevante. Bueno, en función de eso, quería, bueno, abrir un poquito el panel con una primera pregunta introductoria para los 4 ministros y secretarios que nos acompañan, que es, si nos pueden resumir en 3 minutos cada uno, ¿cuál es el principal desafío que ven para los próximos años en su país y en la región, en este sector? ¿Y cuál es la principal oportunidad que tenemos por delante en cada uno de nuestros países? Cecilia, no sé si quieres comenzar.
Bueno, para contestar la primera pregunta, yo diría que la principal amenaza que tiene el sector agroalimentario es no cambiar. Si no cambiamos frente a las realidades, ahí seguiremos aumentando estos indicadores que ya han sido mencionados. ¿Y cuál es la principal oportunidad? Es cambiar ya, es adelantarse al futuro. Y ahí yo quisiera que, además de los problemas que tenemos, que todos han sido mencionados, las crisis financieras, el precio de los alimentos, yo quisiera hacer énfasis en 2. Una que se menciona y otra.
Products, I would like to say something that has been mentioned is the climate related, like what we're going through with droughts, and we have discussed with the country here in Colombia, and it seems like we are in the ocean, because I think that this is a tragedy, because the only way to overcome this is to have grants and subsidies, and we need an agrarian reform policy, because the first action would be to be a part of this humanitarian crisis, and also a crisis when it comes to housing and production. So we have to stimulate production, and I think that this is a very important challenge. And I think that we need to be prepared for the impact of the climatic change and all the other problems. But what I think that has not been mentioned is the poverty, social exclusion that is going on in Latin America, because in Latin America we have half of the rural population in poverty and a quarter in extreme poverty. So if we take a look at the last report of ECLAC, they tell us that we have not recovered the levels before the pandemic that were already a concern, and also rural women, but because we need to recognize all these important things that we need to add to the agricultural products and schedules that are unmanageable. So if we do not consider inequality as one of the big changes that we need to make in order to reduce this gap, I think that we're leaving half of the people aside. Thank you. And I hope I answered the question. Thank you, Minister, of course, impeccable. Avinash, would you like to continue?
Thank you kindly for this opportunity. As we speak, Trinidad and Tobago is facing very serious flooding events in several parts of our Twin Islands state. Already we know that farming will be affected as several crops in the ground are close to harvest. And myself, being a farmer, I know this only too well and firsthand what it means to be impacted by the type of weather systems and patterns that diverge significantly from what we have been accustomed to. And this is all due to climate change. We are already experiencing the grave effects of climate change now. We do not have to wait for the coming decades. What we do, or what we need to do now, is to take measures that enable us to adapt to these impacts. As I said before, international cooperation is essential for adaptation effects. For Trinidad and Tobago, priority areas for investment include technology, tools, and innovations, and best practices that will still allow our farmers to continue with traditional open field farming in ways that are regenerative to the natural resources. And technical support is essential, but it must be matched with financial resources to enable our farmers to access these technologies and tools. Just a perspective from Trinidad and Tobago, our government is currently making investments in this direction, but we need more concerted and sustained support from the international community. And this, this would really assist us. I could tell you probably about 90% of our farmers in this country, as I'm speaking to you now, is in recovery mode and is currently inundated by floods. A few minutes ago, some livestock farmers sent me a couple videos of persons trying to save the lives of livestock. So we speak of this from first-hand experience. Climate change is real, it is here. And whatever we can do in the world today to ensure that food, safe and nutritious food, is available for people, we must do that and take priority in doing that. And we've all been exposed to the impacts of COVID-19 and certainly the supply chain disruptions of our food systems. And that is to show how vulnerable all of us really are in the scheme of food production. So I'm very much happy to be a participant and to share some of the experiences here with all of you all, and do look forward to, productive conversation and, at the end of the day, an action plan in going forward as to how do we deal with this in our respective countries. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Avinash. Juan José Bailo, no sé si...
Juan José Bailo, I don't know if you'd like to continue.
Buenas tardes, buen mediodía para todos.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. A special greetings to the director of AICA, my friend Manuel Otero, and also for all my colleagues from the different countries that are participating on this meeting, and all the authorities and also the members of the civil society. And I would like to thank all the organizers of this meeting, because I think that we need this type of discussions and participations so that we can have an exchange of ideas, visions, experiences. And this is going to allow us to create public policies. And I know that things are not getting easier. And I would like to ratify, first of all, the diagnosis or the description of my colleague from Colombia, Cecilia. I think that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have some differences and similarities that we need to take into account. And I think that the policies should be in that sense. And we also need to provide a better quality of life to all our neighbors. And this is a very complex international situation. And for the region, I know we need to take into account all the aspects. we lost the signal.
Bueno, por ello la comunicación.
Se congeló un minuto. Sí.
No sé si Laura.
I don't know, Laura, would you like to continue in the meantime while we're getting back? Yes, of course. Greetings, everyone, and I would like to thank AICA for this research and also the Wilson Center for planning this event. All the topics that you are bringing to the table are definitely really important. And I think that they will define the destination and the impact of any public policy for the agricultural and food sector. And when it comes to the three elements, I think that encompass the COVID situation, the pandemic, and climate change. Well, I think that the whole continent and all ministers of agriculture are trying to find ways to align ourselves and get ahead and overcome this. And I think that a state policy for the agribusiness sector should be what we are looking for. And we should be looking at the health results. And also when it comes to equity and as for the challenges, I think that in general, but in the context of Honduras, one of our biggest challenges that we have to face, our President Xiomara Castro and myself as the minister, is that basically we are working on a context of poverty. What we have more of, and this is something that has been going on year after year. So how do we see this role of agriculture as an element that under a state policy that is effective, that is equal, that is inclusive, maybe we can contribute to the economy and lower the poverty, and also the remission of the agri-food system is something that should take place at global, regional level, and at the level of all our countries, of course. But I think that as part of this review, we should also start looking at the priority for the destination of this type of production when it comes to all these activities. And for example, how much of that production will be for human consumption or for pets or for bigger species that can be used for human consumption at the same time, and also for biofuels, and what goes to waste. So I think that these are key elements of the global environment. And I think that this global environment, when it comes to the organizations, for example, in the case of AICA that joins so many countries and also United Nations and organizations like FAO and others, I think that that is precisely what we need to do. We need a global commitment to analyze how agriculture is working, the transformation of the food and agriculture systems. For example, in the case of COVID, we should not forget that it's not just a negative impact on the economy, but COVID also revealed the incapacity of all nations to face this type of pandemic when it comes to health services. And if there's a low economy, there's a bigger impact. But also when it comes to health, when we think about our farmers, I think that they continued and with their production and to supply our foods, and that's the reason for us to try and look for solutions, because they have no pension, they have no insurance, no health or agricultural insurance, and I think that all of this is something that is basic for the policy. And in the case of war, I think that there's not much to say, but to ask God and all the stakeholders to help stop this war, because the impact that it's going to have on all the supplies, and that is going to affect the agriculture that needs this retransformation. I think that that is something that depends on external supplies that we cannot cover. So I think that we need more than pray. And when it comes to climate change, I think that this is terrible, because in the case of Honduras, which is on a very narrow stretch of line affected by the ocean, so everything affects us. But I think that the policy in this case should contemplate a focus for a comprehensive management of disasters, but not only climate disasters, but also economic disasters when it comes to prices. And I think that there are many things to discuss, and we don't have that much time, but maybe we can expand this and elaborate on all these topics to see what we can do. What we are currently doing precisely this week is submitting the final draft for a policy for the transformation of the food and agricultural sector when it comes to knowledge management and the needs that we have to become more efficient, transparent as institutions, and to go back to the good governance. And everything has been included. But in addition, we have the biggest challenge when it comes to access to technology for that agriculture that is protected, and that we should have access to finances that is part of each country's own economy, because we have this global speech regarding green climate funds that is really good. And of course, that is something that we take in on every COP, but it's way too slow. It's slower than governments, and that is something that is unacceptable. And also, we need to analyze the marketing. And in marketing, something important for that world policies that need to be revised, like the relation of just and fair prices. And also for the smallest countries have more limitations when it comes to negotiation and to incurring markets. So I think that a public policy that would be comprehensive would be the right answer, and that is what we are betting on, with the elements to try and strengthen the logistics in our country. And under this participating method, where we all have a voice and dialogue, and we are all stakeholders like the public and private sectors, the civil society, NGOs, national and international organizations. That is all for me. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Laura. Un gusto. Bueno, creo que recuperamos la
Well,
comunicación con
I think that we have
redondear un poco la.
Argentina again. I don't know if you wanted to say something else. I apologize for the problems.
Bueno, tratando de sintetizar o de hablar el concepto, creo que
I think that the idea is to think about Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think that the current situation at world level, what the whole world has gone through for the past couple of years, have evidenced all this vulnerability and all the problems that we need to face. COVID, because of its characteristics, stopped the whole world and also the level of activities and led to this recession of economic activities, except for some specific exceptions, and joined to all the things that go beyond, of course, the unfortunate loss of life as a result of this pandemic. And I think that this is something that we need to think when it comes to food in the world, that of course are going to have an impact on everything that is related to logistics and the cost of fertilizers, energy, and all the supplies that we need, and that are going to have an impact not only on the level of activity, but also when we talk about other supplies like energy, and it's also affected the economy everywhere, also generating instability. And I wanted to share with you an example in our country, because this brought problems for $5,000 million, because of when we start analyzing this balance for the financial flows that impacted everything, and all the current problems that we are now facing when it comes to exports, for example. and the problem with the fertilizers, and we have 5,000 more millions that we need to take on as a country. And of course, this has affected the activities, and this is compromising. And I think that we are all going for one reason or another. We are facing problems. And I think that we as a region, the Southern Cone, because of the cultural aspects that we share, then we have some common aspects, and we also have a regional activity, and we also need to analyze the conditions in order to develop of the defense of a model for the production of food and agriculture. And we need the health foods, and we need productive processes that are going to be fundamental. And those are the ones that we need to improve, and we need to incorporate more technologies, and we need to produce more. But that is also part of the solution when it comes to the food problems that we have and what we need to contribute to. And we need to be solidarity, and we need to cooperate, and we need to create a common strategy in order to try and defend our production model, in order to be a part of the solution, and to try and correct all these differences that we have on this region of Latin America and the Caribbean. To try and summarize, we are looking, well, we know that all of these wars are going to affect us, and but we also can think about the things that we could further appreciate as a solution for the food in the world. And of course, we need to create these conditions in order to grow and position ourselves without depending on these circumstances that are affecting us. And as a region, I think that we need to rely on this policy of cooperation in the widest sense, and we need these contributions.
Thank you, Secretary. The Minister Cecilia Lopez is requesting the floor, but before that, I would like to comment to those who are following this dialogue that you could put on the chat box or through Twitter, Latam Pro, you can send your questions and consultations. We're going to have some time at the end, and give the floor to Mr. Lopez. I would like to ask the question that is related to what you mentioned, and this is related to poverty and the restrictions, particularly in a country with an important profile, which is Argentina. The deforestation aspect is a debated topic in international markets, and also for growth of the activity, and of course, giving alternatives to leave poverty, to get out of poverty. Thank you. Since I only spoke for 3 minutes, I would like to, I omitted the greetings, but I would like to say something of great concern. The way the first question is stated, I'm afraid that the whole impact of climate change, nobody denies it, and we are committed to work and reducing it, is hitting the aspect of inequality. To solve this, which is the most serious crisis in Latin America, we do not contribute to climate change, but we receive the effects. We are putting all the agenda there, and we forget that our serious problem is inequality. And what is vital is to set the relationship between inequality and climate change. This is not being done. I have been mentioning this in several times because there is a relationship. And several places that we experience in the rurality in Latin America and other parts of the world, it is impossible to make this transition to get to a sustainable agriculture, which implies more knowledge. I would like to reiterate that it is vital. So I ask organizations like ICA, Wilson Center, and the Area of American Problem to state a clear relationship between the climate change and inequality. If we continue sacrificing this big commitment and remaining just in the impacts of climate change, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. This is the point I want to mention as first point. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And the same line, the Secretary Bellino in Argentina is looking at this meeting. So particularly, we'd like to know how we position ourselves and how we develop technologies and methodologies in order to calculate our emissions and our development locally. How is Argentina working in this thematic? Well, this is something our country is working on. And I would like to add, we are getting strengthened with this. Everything here is under the same concept. That is why the plans that we have to work in different sectors, such as the agro-food and social aspects. With regarding to the evaluation of improvement of crops, we are working in a public and private environment, very important. And this is with the National Institute of Agriculture Technology. They are developing a program related to the impacts of environmental aspects with the productive processes. And they're working in research and attention to share experiences that makes to have one of the productive cycles, which is one of the most efficient worldwide because of the use of technology and the production of food with good indicators. This can be improved, but they are absolutely understandable when talking about emissions and carbon and water footprint. We are working in best agricultural practices. This in coordination with cereals and other important items in the country. We progress in the research and in the good practices for the primary activity, which is agriculture, and also intermediate work. Everything related to the productive sectors. The civil society entities and others work together to develop aspects for the productive sector. The idea is to have new varieties in order to mitigate the results or the consequences of climate change. We are also working with an agro-industrial law that probably will gonna be passed soon because it includes a lot of agro-industrial chains. The idea is to see each chain in this situation. And it also work hard in productivity and productive implementarity with a minor environmental impact. So we need to, as I said before, we are not to be blamed because of the climate change, but we have to pay the price of the consequences of all this damage caused to mankind. What is our task? In two areas. First, to find technical and scientific parameters that inform us that inform each market without discrimination, and validating the productive processes that gives us good indications and authority to state safe, to have safe food, but all this along with the entities in production, but with the validation by public authorities and the scientific side to be as objective as possible, and not only the commercial side or the political side, but including every sector to take care of the environment. Thank you, Ms. Secretary. I would like to highlight here the situation as mentioned by the ministers of Honduras, the impact of climate change on all these aspects we are discussing. I would like to ask you specifically Trinidad and Tobago, what is the role of international cooperation in topics related to adaptation to climate sector in the sector, and what are the priorities of the country regarding investment in this aspect particularly?
Thank you again. In terms of this era, I think this era represents one where never before all countries are facing the same risk and threats. The only difference is frequency and the scale of impacts based on the relative readiness of our respective countries and regions, and the time and resource needed to bounce back. This is the essence of resilience. And for island states where, whether we are small or large, developed or developing, we face these common threats, as our nature makes us even more vulnerable to both man-made and natural hazards. For Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean, our economic, social, and environmental are so closely interconnected with the rest of the world that we need to be alert for a widening of our poverty across our population. That is already being challenged from what the world called climate refugees. The opportunity for us to make the best use of our size and nature to our advantage by building on our resilience and facilitate a broad-based revival of our economy, encompassing all sectors and all segments of the economy, in which lives and livelihoods need to be rebalanced. This is what the Caribbean is pursuing as our collective goal. The agriculture and food sector is a major target of this goal through strong private sector-led investment and public-private financial sector partnerships. Just to give a couple examples in our priority areas, the implementation of climate-smart technologies and agri-food systems, the digitalization of our public sector, and one example is in the land management infrastructure for our country. The international cooperation for research and development is critical in terms of getting climate-smart varieties and resources that are suited for our climate and our conditions. And technical support, as I've indicated earlier, must be matched with financial resources in terms of this urgent need for the future development of our agri-food systems. So these are just some of the areas of technical support for us to really increase our resilience to our food systems and try to treat with our climate change program of work. As most speakers before me alluded to, all of our countries are being impacted by increased weather patterns, climate change. And, collectively, I think we can really come together. And I want to thank ICA for, this forum where all of us can share these concerns. From Trinidad and Tobago's perspective, ICA has been working with our farmers at the ground level up in shaping programs and facilities for us at the government level where we see benefits. So there's much more room for collaboration and technical expertise. And we in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, we definitely welcome all such intervention and initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avinash. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Otro de los temas que se mencionaba al inicio,
Another topic mentioned at the beginning is related to the economic context, global economic context that we are seeing, the inflation processes in the world that has an impact on the management. So I would like to ask Laura Suazo, how this influences or affects the universal access to food and the cost related to poverty, and what policies should be prioritized to mitigate these situations. Thank you. Well, this is one of the topics that all of us would like to have an answer for, an effective answer that could be replicated in the countries. In the particular case of Honduras, the answer to manage somehow or to contain this accelerated increase of prices in the products, first of all, is related to produce. We need to produce anyway. The dynamic of prices increases will be better managed if we produce more, because there's going to be an offer in the population. But to produce, we need incentives. We have 10 months in the administration, and in this 10 months, in any conversation with producers individually and in group, we always talk about this part, meaning that there's no friendly funding for producers. The president reactivated a National Bank of Agricultural Development that was that did not work for 4 years, and to put interest, to put loans at 2.5% of interest. And with that, we have been able to produce this year, and we can say that we have not seen any shortage of these products. One of the elements that threatens the most is that some groups keep all these products in and outside of the chain. And where does people go? Where the state ensures food and at a good price. So what we are doing is a strong connection between the Secretary of Agriculture and Livestock, particularly the director responsible to provide technical advisory. The president enabled funds for a technologic bonus, which are incentives to produce some 400,000 producers that could produce at least 1 hectare of the main products, including coffee and livestock. So that helps us to contain a little bit. But besides that, it is also necessary to talk about the to have active information systems. Last week here in the Gazette official newspaper was included and approved the performance of a census, agricultural census, that we have not had for 30 years. Now we are on the early phases to start on January using or making the census. With that, we're also required to strengthen the agricultural training system, and particularly the system of market prices that let us to manage this. I believe those are some elements, but also the reserves are important. With Bernadette, Secretary of Agriculture, and the Agricultural Marketing Institute are working to have funds for producers, ensure us that they will produce. Sometimes the tradition of the government is that the administration paid in 2 months, and producers want their money immediately. So through the National Bank, they can buy and sell for the consumer to have the appropriate price. This is what we did this year. It was not easy. We need to work with incentives. There's another element related to this consumer prices issue. Normally, the agriculture, we need to move or to strengthen this business focus of agriculture. It's not only agro, it is also the culture of what we produce, but it is also a business. If the producer will cultivate from the beginning without knowing how they will going to be able to sell their product, this scenario is uncertain. Under this uncertain scenario, what wins is the uncertainty of price increases. So the state policy, in the state policy, this is what we are doing to avoid hoarding aspect issues or prices increases or end prices increases. Thank you, Minister Lopez. I would like to go back to the point of inequality and how in this complex scenario, how the public policy and the measures that the national government could take and with support of the international cooperation or without it, to the idea is to address this pertinent agenda you are mentioning. Thanks, Diego. Two things. We are on a proposal, looking at Colombia's history, has a huge dimension, is to make an agrarian reform to have an integral rural development involving the farmers, indigenous and Afro-descendant people that was not included. I would like to say something about this because they may be happening in other countries. What we are seeing is that these sectors, they have been marginalized, and that we would like to link through chains to link them to the big producers. Do you know what we have discovered? Poor people are not requesting inputs or credits or loans or technical assistance. We just set a program to subsidize inputs because of the crisis. All of us know for the poorest farmers, and that is really slow because farmers do not buy inputs, and we give them back 20%, but they do not buy inputs. All these sectors completely marginalized from public policies do not request anything at all. So we offer subventions, low interest rate sky, but they do not require anything at all. And we know this situation is happening in other parts of the world. And this is not the first time. This is the first time I am a Minister of Agriculture. And all this has been an important, big surprise for us. We do not know this marginalized population. In Latin America, we got used to the idea of the last 30 years, the big agribusiness industry will help us. We get full of food imports because we're human populations, and that food is cheaper outside and more expensive inside. We are importing most of corn, which is a product we could produce with productivity that could be good enough. We are importing soya or wheat because we do not have the conditions. But my point is, in this effort of looking at the inequality along with the climate change issue, the food security issue, all these things, in the case of Colombia, food safety is unforgettable. So this level of food insecurity, the index of hungry are cannot be forgiven. So we have short-term action and long-term action. The long-term action needs to start now. And the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for that. I would like to bring these topics into the table. How is it possible that the operation to reactivate the field levels is on the side of the demand if there's no demand? So here we need to better know our populations, our rural population. Those sectors, somebody is speaking, somebody is unmuted. So this sector have been outside the attention of the government, and we need to find a way to stimulate, to know them, to avoid these informal channels. They do not require for a loan, but they require this credit that requires 10% interest rate on a daily basis. So the interest is somebody is speaking, somebody is unmuted and it's difficult to hear.
En Honduras está abierto el micrófono.
The mic is open, is unmuted in Honduras.
Aló, entonces, así muy bien.
Hello.
Siga, ministra.
So you can continue, Minister. I'm gonna unmute this. So what I am saying is that the challenge, the huge challenge, no, it is impossible to. Tirsa Espinosa is unmuted. That it's impossible to. So can somebody mute her? Because I cannot do it from here. Tirsa, you're unmuted. So excuse me. What I was saying is that there is an awakening of the rural aspect because of climate change, because of food unsafety, because of the war, because the livestock cannot continue being associated with deforestation. And we need to go to Europe to see the sanctions for our context. In that context, it is important to admit that we do not know how to get to the populations who would like to recover. And this is because we do not know what they do, and the administrations, I insist, we should offer all the public policies, but we do not understand the demand. At least for me, this has been a discovery. Hopefully that could be an interesting topic ICA could analyze, because it is happening in Asia. In India, the World Bank is carrying out a study, and I believe this is a vital topic, because what is the effort of so many resources to offering a series of things that nobody would request. The sectors that have survived, and I end with this, look what the situation of the pandemic. Farmers in Latin America didn't allow the populations to die because of hunger, and they did everything. So our farmers in this region and our populations, our marginalized populations, have done everything possible to produce the inputs without technical assistance. They know how to do this, so we need to better understand them. This is a point that could help us in this process of making a real recovery of the rural sector in Latin America. Thank you, Minister. Very clear, very interesting words. We are receiving a question of those who are following this exchange online. And there's a question for Secretary Baildo. You mentioned, so the question is, if the current macroeconomic situation in Argentina, what are the difficulties to help with the project of innovation in our country? Is he your line? Excuse me, Diego, could you repeat the question? Because you are quite low. Because of the macroeconomic situation in Argentina, what issues do you have to funding the irrigation projects? There's no question that the conditions, the macroeconomic conditions, are the one we would like to have. We're working hard. So we're in 90 days, we have started an improvement in the macroeconomic level to give strength and confidence to the market. So, and not everything is solved, but we are starting to do that. So all this situation is in the long run. So we're working to correctly have a good level of activity, economic activity, good levels of installed capacity, And we need to correct the aspect related to inflation to have more positive results. The first thing to do is to use previsibility. So we work hard in framework activities when the nations nations see different aspects and using their own protocols that take into account the context and something a little bit more complex. But if we can move on with the agendas, we need to work on agriculture to update the matters. If there is an agreement among private companies or people, we could make treaties using the private sector without quitting the public policies. If there are additional warranties related to investment, we work on the possibility to generate these regular guarantees, but there's no question, and we need to progress in irrigation technologies that give better results and that are affordable from the financial point of view, from the activities of their producers. And we have been supporting this process of investment funding from international organizations. The irrigation technologies are part of the tools that will allow this productive diversity and that will provide a better potential.
Muchas gracias, secretario.
Thank you, Secretary. We have only a few minutes left to close and to give the floor to Manuel Otero for the closing remarks, but I wanted to take these minutes to make a final reflection regarding these topics that we have discussed today. And as a region, I think that we might have projections and coordinated work in the face of all these situations, threats and external risks, and how we can strengthen this regional work in that sense. Laura, would you like to say something? Yes, thank you. I want to relate my closing with the big challenge of having chemical fertilizers and how our economies in our countries have to lead and build with this cost. And I think that this is the right time to look to our economy, towards organic production, and towards the opportunities that we have to analyze, study, and research, and also to have a mass campaign for all world producers regarding organic fertilizers and their contribution as expected in order to develop the different crops in order to offset that negative campaigns that we've seen throughout time, without denying that we have organic fertilizers and chemical fertilizers, and we need to have that balance, and we need to review all of this together. And we also have this need for intercontinental alliances when we have countries that within America, they are producing some of the materials for the preparation of fertilizers. And I think that it's the right time to take a look at these dependencies. And because I think that we could purchase at better prices, particularly in Honduras, so only this year for all of these 300 million lempiras that were focusing on the technological aspects, and they wanted to focus on organic, and some of these, well, we were able to to save 150 million by having all these tenders. So we have from what we have, which was like 1,350 in the market, and we were able to buy it at 700 or 800 lempiras. And that happens when we do these mass purchases. And for the beginning of the next year, that is something that we like to promote. And we need to take a look at transportation and freight, sea freight, and I think that everything has been increasing, and we have no one to make these claims to, or who should ask for a reduction for these types of freights. And I want to close with the high importance of taking a look at the mapping of soil fertilizer for all our territory, because this is going to help us become more efficient when it comes to the ingredients that we really need for our crops. For example, if we want to produce, well, I'd like to thank you for the invitation, and I really like this type of exchanges that allow us to reflect upon the experiences of others. And I want to close by confirming that in the case of Honduras, our government plan and the work of the president and all of us is teamwork, and we are setting our eyes on agriculture in order to guarantee the food sovereignty, and also to analyze if through agriculture we can reduce poverty and have a better economy. So thank you again. Thank you, Laura. Avinash?
Hello. Yes. So regarding the concept of this fertilizer issue that we've all been facing, I think in the Caribbean region, we have a long history of developing regional strategies on a number of issues deemed critical for regional development. CARICOM already has several coordinating mechanisms within which this can be done. We have the participation in the Special Regional Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security. And this is a partnership with the Caribbean private sector organizations. I'm sure recently you all would have noticed that CARICOM, we would have pledged our intention to reduce our food import bill by 25% by 2025. And this is through regional agricultural investment opportunities in our respective countries. It is more than conceivable that this issue of the secure and the supply of all the key inputs for farming in general, that really reduce our reliance on extra regional imports and enhance our own capabilities for regenerative agriculture, already being addressed at regional levels as part of these regional initiatives. We have developed a joint strategy for water management for agriculture with support from ICA. So I want to say special thank you to ICA. And at this moment, we are seeking international support to implement this project. Water management is absolutely essential for soil health and efficiency in input use, and this is including a fertigation system which also enhances efficiency in use of fertilizers, both synthetic and bio-based. So the short answer to this issue is yes, we are capable of a joint strategy and coordinated implementation. What we need is genuine international cooperation and support. We have as a base several projects already being implemented in the region that can be scaled up. And I'll just name two examples. One is the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Project with ICA in 4 Caribbean islands, which is taking a nature-based approach to soil health, and this can be easily scaled up. The second is the Moroccan project in the OECS, which is being driven by the private sector, with the Moroccan government on soil testing for precision fertilizer recommendations, which form the base of an information system that can guide more efficient fertigation. Because most times in our countries, you have farmers utilizing fertilizer. Now, fertilizer is already so scarce, I would say, and expensive at this point in time. It's unfortunate that we would have farmers misusing, or I should say overusing fertilizer, so that these projects really, will help us to know what the efficient rates of application should be based on our soil profile. I could tell you in Trinidad and Tobago, we have very acidic soils. So you can put any amount of fertilizer into those soils, you simply will not get the results. So strategies in place of putting limestone, organic limestone, or the instant limestone, we have been utilizing those. So we have several projects that provide a base, but they remain a base because resources are limited to scale them up. So in the context of moving forward, these are some of the things that we in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, would be looking towards scaling up with resources. So again, thank you for offering our experience in this regard, and I do look forward to further participation.
Thank you very much, Avinash Singh. Juan José Bailo, no sé si...
Juan José, would you like to say some final comment? You are muted. I want to be very brief because I think that I have been given enough time to share our goals, and I just wanted to mention something that I already said but want to emphasize, and I think that cooperation, solidarity, joint work in the region is something that we definitely need in order to define common policies, actions, and strategies in the face of a fast changing world that is more concentrated. And I think that this is the way that we needed to work to try and face these international conditions that are threatening the region, and due to all cultural aspects or many other things, we have important inequalities. And I think that this is something that we need to work in cooperation with the region. We have had some efforts and contributions, and that we have been working together, but I think that we needed to reinforce all this work and to make this a part of all of our government's agendas in order to make it progress in that sense, and that is the answer that we definitely need as part of these public policies, as part of this transformation. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Minister Lopez, would you like to say something? Thank you. Just two quick conclusions. First, we cannot allow to have an oligopoly when it comes to fertilizers, and this is what is affecting us. And we need to replace the source for the supply as part of this transition, as Laura said, when it comes to chemical fertilizers, then we need to move towards bio-based, and we have $50 million from the World Bank in Colombia in order to promote internal production, but we need a regional production, and I think that it's important for Latin America to get together regarding this topic, and it would be strategic to have an agreement regarding how much can be replaced and everything that we need for the countries in Latin America. And quickly, regarding livestock and deforestation, I think that deforestation is something that when it comes to trade terms for the Latin American products into the European Union, I think that we will be penalized. We know about contamination and pollution, but in the case of Colombia, I think that this is a left side government, but livestock has always been on the on the right side, so that we are trying to continue with our agrarian reform, but that is a part of this extensive livestock to intensive. So we needed to reduce the contamination and to have more things available. And Colombia has been distorted. So I think that we have the instruments, the elements, and in the case of Colombia, the will to be a part of this driver in order to reduce the deforestation, environmental pollution, and to have more livestock with the new systems. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. I would like to thank the four ministers for their space and for the reflections. And it was a short time, but I think that we were able to cover many important aspects. So thank you again. And now I would give the floor to Manuel Otero. Thank you.
Hicieron sus aportes. Yo tomé tantas notas que
I took so many notes that I really don't know where to start. And we're saying because of my veterinarian handwriting, I would like to start by climate change. But before that, I ask Mr. Cecilia if you want to make any comment because you have the hand raised. Okay, good. I would like to start by climate change issue because the interventions of the Minister Cecilia and the Minister of Trinidad and Tobago were strong about this climate change issue. There's no question that the point is here and now, as the Minister Cecilia said, it cannot be analyzed on an isolated manner. So it has to be seen with the inequality issue because there is a feedback, a clear feedback in that. There's no question we are the most vulnerable region of the world, that we are suffering the effects of a problem, a huge problem we have not caused, but it is not worthy to cry a lot, and evidently we are the protagonist of the new times. And it is clear we need to implement a new generation of government policies that need to be in favor of the farmers. The Secretary Laura mentioned this pretty well. It has to be in favor of the nature to produce more, but in a symbiotic manner with the environment, in favor of society because the resources belong to all of us, biodiversity belongs to all of us. The new generation of policy has to be interinstitutional. So I imagine the complexity of the ministries you are leading because everything has to be done under the framework in agreement with other ministries. I would like to give some touches of precautious optimism. The Minister Cecilia said that because of the decision of President Petro, agriculture and rurality is on the top of the agenda. The Secretary Laura says that he will discuss with the President government policies, and 30 years later, there's going to be an agricultural census. The Secretary Bailo says, I will discuss with the other political parties with an agro-industrial law. And the Ministry of Trinidad and Tobago said, just with cooperation in the midterm, we're going to move forward. So it seems that finally we are seeing agriculture and rurality and putting it in the place it deserves. And looking to the past, this did not happen in the past. So good that now with a systemic approach from production to consumption, we're giving the systems, the agri-food systems, we're giving them the role they need to fulfill. Another comment about the Ministers of Agriculture, and this is a personal position. There should be consultation scopes by chain. So it is vital to try to see where the transaction costs are, because they are excessive, and trying to promote the dialogue a chain with systems that I believe have coordination failures. Mr. Cecilia mentioned something very interesting, and when she said the poor do not ask anything, I believe, although take this question, Mr. Cecilia Nica will study this. I believe that farmers, particularly small farmers, are exacerbating the aversion to irrigation in such an uncertain context where I believe that the cooperativism aspect is one of the ways to go. Even small producers do not join their forces through visions of cooperativism, I believe the situation is going to be even more complicated. But I propose and I suggest the possibility that from ICA we coordinate some study with some of the countries represented here to better understand what are the behaviors and see what we can get from a propositive nature study. It is evident that we are on a transitional process, a transition where agriculture is much more intensive in knowledge and agriculture much more in favor of agroecology, where science and innovation have to be vital. We need to do more research and better research. We need to show, we need to be much more united. And here, I am mentioning the pending issue that in matter of intra-regional trade in our continent, there's only 14% of intra-regional trade, while the European Union is 65%. So we complain about some things, but this political will need to be transmitted in much more trade and to build bridges, even more bridges among our countries. I'll stop here. I really thank you again for this big opportunity that I have had to listen to you and to reiterate that ICA is at your service. Thank you for your comments, and of course, that will contribute to enrich the agenda of technical cooperation of ICA, the service of countries. Floor is yours, Diego, and thank you for the moderation. Thank you, Manuel. Interesting reflections, closing remarks. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for your participation. Benjamin, would you like to close the event? Just to join my appreciation to everybody. This has been a quite encouraging conversation. The next steps are evident for us.
Colaboración con todos esos ministerios, con esas
These
instituciones.
ministries and institutions with you, Manuel, Ica, and all my friends present here. This is a very important topic for my institution, for the Wilson Center. And thanks to the audience that is following us, so we're going to touch this topic in a near future. Again, thanks, everybody. Have a nice rest of the day. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.